I had a great time at the second annual Audio Advice Live Home Theater AV Hi-Fi show. I strongly encourage you, if you're thinking about it next year, definitely book the trip and come on out. I hope to be there again. But I wanted to kind of go over what I consider to be kind of like the top 5 things that I enjoyed seeing, or the top 5 things that I was really interested in checking out at the show, had some fun with, had a great experience with, and all of that. So in no particular order, number 1, of course, man, awesome speakers. I love audio. I love awesome speakers. If you're a channel follower, you know I'm a Focal brand fanatic, and Focal was there in force. Grand Utopias in the lobby. They had a separate room with the Thebas, the Vestias, and the Sopras, and they had a whole home theater based on those lovely, lovely Cantas. So I talked to the Focal reps, had some really great conversations there. Of course, one option for endgame for me in my spaces is, of course, a whole bunch of those 1,000 in-wall Utopias. They didn't have those there. Pretty much the only thing pretty much the only major thing in the Focal lineup that wasn't. But other cool stuff as well, of course. I was ecstatic when I saw Perlisten. Audio Advice is now carrying Perlisten. Got to listen to the S7Ts. Got to handle their hefty new in-wall lineup. And man, that is also looking sweet. That could be a really, really great option as well for a future iteration, who knows, of the Techthusiasm home theater and living room hi-fi space. But beyond that, man, so many just really massively impressive big floor stander speakers. I love them. Sonus Faber, the Stradivari was there. The new B&W 800 series, of course, those Grand Utopias. Perlisten brought those towers. I just loved it. I really contend, if I had to divest myself of this house, downsize my life, and not end up in a space where I was able to accomplish a dedicated home theater, I think I would just be going high-end 2-channel, even 4 movies and all of that. Living room setup, get yourself a big 98-inch screen, and just plow all that money into some just massively awesome, impressive, imposing, big floor standing towers that are just literally works of art and just high-end furniture. The way some of these speakers present, man, they're just beautiful. And of course, they sound utterly fantastic as well. So definitely speakers the highlight. And I'm not even getting to, let alone all the other stuff was there. Like the new Monitor Audio Hyphens, the big Martin Logans, just so many brands. If you're shopping stuff, you're considering options, you really owe it to yourself to go to a show like this where you can literally go room to room to room and target the stuff that you want to listen to. Paradigm had their space as well. Those speakers sounded excellent, running on, of course, an Anthem MRX receiver. But yeah, the thing, of course, that I was most excited about was those Focals and those Perlistens personally. Number 2 thing that I found a lot of interest in for the duration of the show was, of course, displays. I love video. I talk a lot about video here. I've got that awesome JVC NX7 projector in the next room. I've got the LG G2 OLED up in my living room. And I've mentioned a number of times, I think one of the key home theater upgrades that I would really like to make is to get to a flagship JVC. Currently the NZ9. We'll see what comes after the NZ series. Probably not until the next year. But JVC had their room. They had that top end model there. Man, just so nice, so bright, so sharp. That would be the number 1, I think, most impactful thing that I could add to my home theater setup, I believe, right now. Honorable mention to the other brands as well, but JVC, I think JVC is really at the pinnacle of home theater displays right now. But while we're talking about displays, I have to also mention that massive Samsung wall. 146 inches. Is it going to be the future of home theater? In some ways, I kind of can't imagine how it's not. Like the form factor, the logistics, and all of that stuff of being able to do a massive panel display in that way just absolutely trounces projectors. Black levels, brightness, HDR performance, and all of that stuff. And if you think about it, yeah, it's super expensive right now. $220,000 for a 146-inch display is breaking the bank. Certainly for most everybody, including myself. But where are we going to be in 3 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years? We could be in a completely different space. If you think about it, we only got a first iPhone, 15 or so years ago? And look at what we have in the palm of our hands today in terms of its capabilities, its services, its features, its hardware, and yeah, even its price point. So never rule out the pace of engineering and technology. So it'll be a segment to keep our eyes on, I think. Probably won't be a major factor for a while to come. But, man, you never know, again, what the future holds. and that display was just like utterly, utterly impressive. They still have some work to do. You could notice the way the pixel definition and such was. There was a little bit of graininess to it, almost like kind of a film grain that was more noticeable in some scenes than others. And they definitely need to boost up some elements of like the motion processing, at least for film and video. Playing movie content at 24 frames per second, you could definitely see some things break up in fast motion. Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick, where the planes are flying really fast, they would tend to break up a little bit. But I also had the occasion to see a PlayStation 5 running on that same display, and racing games, fast moving games and stuff that was being played at 60 frames per second didn't have quite the same breakup or some of the same motion troubles that the movie content did. So I think it's doing better at higher refresh rates. Most everything available out there has room to be improved, room for more development and resources and all of that to be applied to it. But this is a segment I'm really excited about, and we'll kind of just sit back and watch it for the next several years and see where it goes. My number 3 thing has to do with like video content sources and processing. You couldn't go to a show without seeing a whole bunch of these all over the place. Kaleidescape. They had a little demo table, but they didn't really need much more than that because they were essentially in so many of the rooms. Almost every single theater space, save one, I think was running their demos on Kaleidescape. And even some of the just audio only rooms, some of the 2-channel rooms, like the Paradigm space, were actually using Kaleidescapes as well because they were playing lossless concerts and all of that. You want to step up the presentation, the elegance, the usability of your theater. Man, that's it right there. The highest quality source that you can get in your home environment today. Access to all that content and just like stepping up the overall presence of your room. You really felt it in a demo room that was using Kaleidescape versus a room that wasn't, that was pulling up ripped content off of a list from some type of a local streamer, or even the rooms as well that were just using Blu-ray players and changing discs. Kaleidescape just elevated the whole experience. The part 2 of that, of course, is the video processing. So madVR was all over. They had NVs in a bunch of the theater spaces. They had their own demo table where they were showing off their new features and motion processing, AI-based algorithms and all that. And Lumagen was there as well. Lumagen actually was in what I would say one of the most premium theater spaces, the Barco Focal Room, that I enjoyed so much. So those video processors doing work, and I'm hopeful to get my hands on some more of that in the future here in the Techthusiasm home theater. All over the show, of course, a lot of audio, but the one thing that actually really impressed me the most was the performance of all of the spaces running on receivers. Audio processors and some really, really nice looking amplifiers, some really expensive gear, some really expensive separates around the show. And of course, that stuff looks great, it sounds great, and you would expect it to be high performance for the dollars that are involved in buying some of that stuff. But man, just thinking more holistically about a lot of the demos that were being ran at the show, and the fact that so many of them were just being run on receivers. And we're talking some of the home theater demos in the bigger ballrooms. The B&W theater demo space was a receiver. The Definitive Technology theater space was a receiver. The Sony Kef home theater space was a receiver. And even when I went up to the Paradigm room, they had the speakers set up in there, a couple of subwoofers, 2-channel setup. I presumed that we were probably listening to an STR or perhaps an AVM90 and some separates. I asked them, what are you driving all this with? Oh, it's an MRX 740. Sounded fantastic. And in all these spaces, even the number of speakers that were being driven, the volumes that they were running some of this stuff at, I didn't really detect any lack of power, lack of presence, and certainly no lack of volume for the level that these demos were being played at. Even the Samsung wall space, which had the JBL, the big JBL in walls in a 3-channel configuration, I asked those folks, hey, what are you running these speakers with? It was a receiver. Man, just wild. And that was a big room that I had the occasion Saturday night to spend a little more time in. They were playing concerts in there. Really, really loud volume, effortlessly being driven by that receiver. Of course, those JBL in-walls help quite a bit in terms, I think, of creating a lot of sound and being very, very efficient and easy to drive and getting a lot of energy and effort and whatnot out of those horns. But still, a lot of us aspire to separates or want to have separates. I do have separates as like an end game focus for our our setups, and particularly maybe our home theater setups as well. But, you know, don't feel that you have to push yourself there. These new receivers that are coming out, man, they have processing, they have audio quality, and they have power to probably meet the demands of most people's needs when we're talking about the size of space that you may have actually in your theater room and the volume levels and stuff that you may actually play content at. Or, as I talked about in a recent video, you know, maybe one of the best things that you can do in your setup, just start with a receiver, get a nice quality receiver that has all the features and capabilities and input and outputs that you need, but make sure you buy a receiver that has pre-outs on it. And maybe you take your LCRs or your mains, you put those on an external amplifier, and man, just let the rest of the stuff run off of those receiver amplifier channels. Take that load off, let things run a little with a little less demand of power, a little more clean, a little more open, a little less heat, and all that. And honestly, that's probably an end game setup for the large majority of folks in this hobby. Of course, some of these receivers too were flagship models, big Marantz and Denons. They're pretty expensive nowadays. They're getting up into the few thousand or more dollars, but this is also kind of an expensive hobby. So scale down as you need to, but just know, like, the state of receivers in this space, I don't think has ever been better than it is right now in terms of what they're capable of doing. And lastly, number 5 thing that I was really kind of curious to check out, and something that I'm personally jonesing for as well, is those home theater seats. There were really 2 main brands and models of seats highlighted at the show. A lot of the demo spaces just had regular kind of like ballroom chairs that people were sitting in. But of course, Audio Advice recently launched their new home theater seat, the Revelation model. That was there in a couple of different rooms. And RowOne HT was also there with their new Calvary seat. And it was there in 2 forms actually. They had a cloth version in the Sony Kef room, and they had the leather version in the Barco Focal Storm Audio room. Now, I thought both of these chairs were actually quite excellent, but they're very different form factor depending on what your needs might be. The Audio Advice chair, I would say, is a little bit more of what you would expect from a normal home theater chair design. A little higher back, comfy, and just a little bit more bigger and kind of imposing overall. But they packed a lot of power into that chair. I like the controls being in the cup holder. I love having footrest movement, headrest movement, and lumbar. And at my height, 5'10", I was able to sit in that chair, put my feet up, inflate the lumbar, and get the headrest in a really, really comfortable position. The vegan leather material is actually really quite nice. I think it's almost a little bit of a nice compromise between, say, cloth and full-on like natural leather. I have vegan leather in my Tesla, and that material's held up. It's very comfortable. I don't find it to be too hot driving the car in the summer. And it works out quite well there. No reason to think that it wouldn't work out in the long run in a home theater seat as well. They include the tray tables, just lots and lots of good positive elements, I think, to that Audio Advice Revelation seat. On the other hand, those RowOne seats, very low profile, maybe more akin to a shared space or like a living room space where you might want to have a theater-esque recliner, but you need spousal acceptance factor, or you want something that looks more like a contemporary piece of furniture and less like more of a dedicated home theater seat. You gotta like the idea of sitting in a chair and having your head and your ears exposed to the surround sound audio without having a high back that's blocking sound that may be happening behind you or coming at you from behind. Sitting open with your ears exposed lets you kind of get more of a cohesive surround sound field. That's a huge plus for the seat. And even when you brought the headrest up on the Calvary, it still only came, about maybe upper neck, mid neck. You could get a nice support to put your head back, but still have a level of access and exposure to your ears. Nice material, some unique design, still has a drawer down in front, still has cup holders, and of course they have their newly patented port, essentially, where right now they have a touch-based swivel reading light. Not so useful perhaps for home theater, but again, if you're putting it in a multi-function space, that might actually be really, really interesting. Or perhaps if you're sitting in your theater and you're setting stuff up, you're doing calibrations and doing some other things, being able to just pop that in and have a little bit of work light where you're sitting, that could actually prove pretty useful as well. So it leaves me with a big question for sure, what kind of seat might I actually prefer in my theater space? I don't know. Stay tuned, because it's definitely a toss-up. Both of those models were excellent though, and I feel completely comfortable maybe recommending that you check either one of them out. So that's my main 5 takeaways, the stuff that I was really most excited to see, some of the things that impressed me as well from the show. And again, if you're shopping these things, you want to go and experience a whole bunch of different elements of home theater and hi-fi, go to Audio Advice next year, go to M-Wave, go to these kind of shows that really let you like cohesively experience all of this stuff back to back to back. And I think you can really find it as like a catalyst to make better decisions perhaps for what you're buying and how you're setting up your spaces. And hey, hopefully I'll see you there next year at all of these shows. Thanks so much for watching. If you find the content useful, hey, there's multiple ways to support the channel. Leave a tip with a super thanks or in PayPal or Venmo. And of course, everything I'm talking about is available at Audio Advice, and I have an affiliate relationship with them. Please follow the links if you would to buy all this awesome home theater and hi-fi gear from them and support Tech Enthusiasm that way. Otherwise, please do all the regular YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, hit the bell, share the video, and all of that. Thanks so much for watching. Coming back for more home theater discussion and fun.